Today we're going to talk a little bit about the registration of trademarks. So there are really two things that you have to understand about the registration process. The first is it's actually not necessary. And the second is a little bit about the way in which it functions in the Australian system. So on the first point, it's actually not necessary to register a trademark. If you actually create a reputation in a mark, let's say you've got Dan's Famous Chocolates or something like that, and you're just selling them locally, you can create a reputation in that, and you don't need to register it if you don't want to. What can happen is if someone comes along and starts using that particular mark, Dan's Famous Chocolates or Dan's Chocolates or whatever, then I can bring an action against them for what's called passing off or some kind of deception under Section 18 of the Consumer Law. And basically what I'm saying is consumers are going to be confused. They're buying this other chocolate when in fact they thought they were getting Dan's Famous Chocolates. But the problem with that is it's quite difficult to establish that reputation. And that reputation is typically only going to be very local. It might just be only the people that come into my store here in Hawthorn. So do I want a better system than that? And the answer is, yeah, in general I do. And the way in which I get around that is through the registration system. So Australia has a system of registration of trademarks. And what that means is for a fairly small price, you fill out an application. It's pretty straightforward. You can actually get them online and you don't need a lawyer to do it. And what happens is that you apply for a trademark. You apply for, let's say, Dan's Famous Chocolates in a particular class. So there are a range of classes for both trademarks and service marks. And what you do is you say, I want to register it in the class related to food and food products. The thing is then that it goes through an examination process. So there are 5 stages in the entire process of getting a trademark. The first is the application. The second is the examination process. The third is the decision. The fourth is the opposition. And the final one is registration. So the application process is pretty straightforward. You fill this out. You seek registration in a particular class, right? And you file it in the trademark office, in the Australian IP office, and you pay the required fee, which is relatively modest. So then what happens is that the examiner in the trademark office takes a look at it and says, is this thing actually a trademark? So does it function as a trademark? Does it distinguish your goods? And is there any other reason why it shouldn't be registered? Now there are a few reasons why it shouldn't be registered. It might be a scandalous mark. It might be a swear word, for example, or it might reference something that's objectionable to the community. So that won't get registered. It might also be that there's something already registered which is very similar to that mark. So there's no point in trying to register something that references, say, Nike, right, or Coke, right? Even if it's in a different class, it's not going to get up. There's just no way that that's going to happen. So the examiner will take a look at it and go through the process. And 9 times out of 10, right, as long as you're not seeking to actually get a benefit out of this, from riding on the coattails of somebody else, that the thing will be registered, or at least it will be approved for registration. So that's the third part of the process. It either is rejected or it's accepted for registration. Then what happens is that it is published for opposition, as it's called. So it actually is put in an official journal, in the journal of the Trademark Office, and it actually goes out for everybody to be able to oppose this particular registration if they want to, if they're affected by it. So take the example, if you wanted to register something that related to Monster, let's say, and there are lots and lots of registrations out there, lots and lots of interests out there that use the word Monster. Take an example, Monster energy drinks. So they might say, well, the registration of Monster in relation to, I don't know, shoes or speakers or cameras or something like that affects their interests. It might be confusingly similar. It might be deceptively similar to somebody else's or to their mark. And so consumers might be confused buying the boots thinking that it was associated with Monster energy drinks. So they will oppose the registration, right? And there's a process that takes place to work out whether or not that opposition is acceptable, whether it's going to get up. And so within the 3-month period, anybody can oppose the registration of the mark. But if they do, there'll be a hearing and there'll be a final determination. After the end of that 3-month period, if there's no opposition, or alternatively, if the opposition fails, if it's dismissed, then what happens is that the mark is able to be registered and actually goes on the official register of trademarks, and then you get all of the rights and benefits associated with having this federal registration that operates throughout Australia, that means that you don't have to prove reputation and you can assert your rights against others in an infringement action. In other videos, we'll talk about those sorts of infringement actions. But for today, the two things that you need to take out of this particular video is, first, you actually don't need registration in order to be able to assert your rights. But if you do seek registration, you have to go through the 5-step process, eventually leading to the grant of a federally registered Australian trademark.